Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of the Highland Park Rent Control Board to order. It is March 27th at 5:30 p.m. So this meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 21st, 2005, and was posted on the borough website at www.hpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall 221 South Fifth Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. So the first order of business we'll move to is the approval of the minutes from February 27th, 2025. Those were distributed prior to the meeting. Can we get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? See none. Motion carries. Minutes from February 27th are hereby approved. So the first thing I would like to move to on the agenda is a brief chair's report. Welcome everybody that's here from public. I will say that what we're discussing tonight, this is the Rent Control Board of Highland Park. We do not make public policy here. So everything that we're discussing tonight is about making recommendations to the Borough Council for consideration on the ordinance. And to the extent that there is disagreement, we will take that into account. I think report all of that back to the Borough Council, including anything that we may get from public comment later on in the meeting. I would like to make a few notes about procedure and decorum. We will follow to where it does not, to the extent that it does not conflict with any of our bylaws or rules that we've established otherwise, we'll follow parliamentary procedure. The reason for this, of course, is that we keep structure and order throughout the meeting and that it provides fairness and equality when it comes to participation so that all can participate. I don't think any of us need to have this entire book memorized. I think a few simple rules. One, I will be keeping stack for the entire meeting. That's the queue of people to speak. If you would like to speak, even if it's in response to what somebody is saying at that moment, please just signal to me. I'll be scanning the room periodically and get you all on stack. Do not speak until recognized by the chair. That way we can keep order and make sure everybody is getting a chance and an opportunity to speak. So we won't be going back and forth. If someone says something you would like to respond to, please go on stack. That goes for anybody at this table. Please go on stack and I'll make sure that we move the meeting along so that anybody who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so. All right. When we get to public comment, depending on how many people want to speak, I'll ask that you keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes at a time. You can always go back and speak again once everyone else has gotten a chance to speak, if that's fair. All right, do we all agree? Great. Consent? Good. All right, the first thing we need to do tonight in order to move into executive session, as was posted, is to pass a resolution to do so. So everybody should have gotten a copy of resolution 2025-1.
Wait a second.
Nope, this is not the right one.
That should be number 2.
2025-2.
But it was resolution authorizing executive session.
It is the resolution authorizing executive session. Right, so we will need a roll call on this.
Jared is not here.
Sure.
Pauline?
Here.
Lucinda?
Here.
HP?
Here.
And
Then we
Diane?
can vote.
Here.
All right, now let's vote on the resolution authorizing executive session. Actually, I need to move first. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution? Second.
Second.
Again. Pauline?
Yes.
Lucinda?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
HP?
I'll vote yes.
This passes.
All right, so we will now move into executive session for just the part of the meeting that needs to be an executive session. We will come back out to discuss everything else on the agenda that is not confidential.
Can you please clarify the potential litigation? If I'm understanding the Open Public Meetings Act correctly, movement to executive session requires it to be pending or close specific litigation rather than potential litigation broadly.
All right, I will yield to our borough attorney to answer that.
So we've mentioned that's potential litigation in regards to. the
Sorry, could you please
ordinance,
speak
and
up?
we've already mentioned that.
So we have a point of personal privilege from the audience. They can't hear. Can we speak loud enough for them to
So
hear?
I'm recovering from COVID, so this is as high as
Oh,
I can
no.
go. So potential litigation, potential litigation, and what happening is that we were discussing the ordinance the last time, so it's proper notice as far as executive session goes.
So the answer to that is that it is not pending litigation, but potential litigation. However, we have given proper notice that we would be moving into executive session.
That doesn't matter. There are only so many ways that a public meeting can move into executive session. They're pretty strictly required, and especially this broad notice of potential litigation is not sufficient to fully be appropriate to the Open Public Meetings Act. It must be more specific than that.
Again, I'll yield to the borough attorney for this one. It's a legal question.
This is proper the way we did it.
All right, being advised by the borough attorney that this is proper the way that we've done it, so we will move into executive session. I assume that we have a separate room to go to for
Yeah, we
this.
have the conference.
And we will only be discussing exactly what is in the memo and nothing further.
How long is the executive session expected to last?
I hope less than 20 minutes.
Thank you. I do still object, and I think that it is not.
Your
appropriate.
objection is noted. Thank you. Huh? Ready? Ready? Ready?
Ready.
All right. All right, I'm going to call this meeting of the Highland Park Grant Control Board back into public session, and we will move on to the open discussion portion of the meeting. So we have an order listed here where we've identified the different parts of the ordinance that we would still like to discuss. And so we will start with exemptions, and I will open the floor to anybody that has comments about that particular part of the ordinance. Terry, go ahead.
Just to remind, in case for everybody's benefit, that we're talking about what types of properties this would apply to. I think we've discussed that quite a bit. I think initially the council was very intentional, including all rental property, one single family through, multifamily. But then there was also the discussion about should owner occupied 2, 3, 4s be exempted? As we've seen that in some other towns. And so
Can you clarify that right now, nobody is exempted?
nobody's exempted right now. So that's where we are. And so I just wanted to just gauge on that one once and for all. For now.
What do others think? Go ahead, Diane.
I do think that owner occupied 2 families should be exempted. I don't think they're very different from single families. I think that many of them are owned by people who have lived in them for a long time. I don't think they're real estate, I don't think they're big property owners. If they own one, I don't think anyone owns 50. And I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure. And honestly, I will say this humble brag is that I spent many years in housing in this town. I've probably been in 80%. I've been in your apartment. I've been in your apartment. I've probably been in your house. I kind of know what the two families are like. It doesn't exempt me. I own a two-family, but it doesn't exempt me. But I do know that many of them are owned by seniors who've lived in them for a long time. That's my feeling.
Point of information, can we clarify when we say owner occupied, that we just mean tenants that are living in the same place as the land, like the same property as the landlord?
100%. It would
Right.
only be, and I think that's what Diane, you alluded to, is like, you own a two-family, but you don't live in it.
No,
So that two-family would not be exempted
not
from the
exempt.
Right.
ordinance. It would be if you had probably it's not a 1, but 2 to 4 family. And if you lived in one of the 4, 3, 2 units, that building would be exempted. And so
But-
that's, you know,
I thought that
but
would
I'm
be like
not
a
saying
multi-unit.
that. I'm not saying
or
that.
I should have said the 2 or 3. I
No,
think
I'm
4 is-
only saying
a
two
two
families,
families.
owner occupied,
Okay,
not 3 family, because
Okay.
once you're in a 3,
it's
you're
more of
covered
a
by the
building.
state, you're. under
I thought
the
it was
state.
above 4, so yeah.
No, it's 3 or
So it
more.
would just be owner occupied 2 families is the
Mhm.
proposal you're suggesting. Okay,
Or one family if it's a room and you're subletting.
I don't know if you're allowed to do that.
All
So
right, well,
that may
good.
be on the DL kind of situation.
I think that's how it usually happens.
Yeah.
So this is for two, we would,
occupied.
two family for owner occupied,
Basically, it's like a duplex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
reminding
But the
everybody to
owners
stack.
Upstairs and the tenants below,
I
of
understand. the
which I
proposal.
believe there are about 400 in town.
400 owner occupied 2-unit.
I think so. But I don't know that for sure, and I haven't been doing it for a number of years, so, things change.
So we said, anyone else on this? We're recording each of these, right? Because I think we decided even if there's a plurality of positions on this, that we would share those all with the council. So can you, we've recorded Diane's that these should be exempted.
Yep.
I would like to go on the record thinking I think I would like it, no exemptions at this point.
Okay.
I'm a little, especially knowing it's 400 units.
Well,
and I'm
I
not-
don't know that there are that many.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess we could get that from the tax assessor,
yeah.
and then we'd be, yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
Because Diane and I had an email exchange, we can know probably how many 2 families, but if they're owner occupied or not, it would be difficult for us to figure out.
Right.
Even to find out how many 2 families there are.
I think what Diane's saying sounds very reasonable. I also worry about the negative externalities, like what are the unforeseen consequences here that we're not considering and how this
Mhm.
might actually play out in real ways. But I think both
I got it.
should be noted, and I
Yeah,
think the
we'll
council
put them
should take
both
that
in the
into
memo.
consideration. Any other comments on? All right, shall we move on? CPI calculation. So this is currently, just for those that are joining us and may not know the ordinance, the way that we calculate the maximum rental increase each year is currently the average of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation, between New York and Philadelphia. So we add those 2 numbers together, we divide by 2, and that's where we get our maximum increase. I think currently it's what, 3 point,
Back in my,
I have the number somewhere.
I want to say 3.7.
3.6, 3.7.
3.55.
3.55, right, which is an average of the 2. And I'll open it up for comment. Ideas on this? You know, I have some, but I'd like others to weigh in first. All right, I will weigh in. I shared data a while ago. I'm not sure if anybody still has that in their notes. Mine is probably in here somewhere, demonstrating that generally CPI is around 4%, a little bit less than that, or has been for several years. These, of course, compound over time. The average wage increase in Middlesex County in the last year was less than 1%. It was something around 0.5 percent. And I did graph that, I think, at one point in the handout that I gave
I
and
remember.
demonstrate that if rents are increasing at 4% compounding every year and wages are not, of course, what we end up with is everyone's getting poorer and it becomes more and more difficult. I've looked through several ordinances and I haven't found any that actually take wage growth into account, but a lot of ordinances do take a percentage of, here we go, a percentage of CPI into consideration. And so what I would like for the council to consider is making, rather than just a flat average of the two, making that a percentage of that, something like 75%, 80%. This seems to be, there's a lot of ordinances that do this, and it allows us to sort of take into account that wages are sticky and that wage growth is moving a lot slower than price growth, right? And so in a way that makes it still very easy to calculate and not having to have some, very unknown complicated calculations to do this. And it seems to be very common. So just throwing that on the table for a possibility here that allows us to reconcile that sum, right? It might end up being about a percentage lower maybe than what it is, but and not quite closer to wage growth than to price growth, but not quite price growth either, which seems to roughly be what would happen if you just allow prices to vary with the market rather than having rent control. Any other comments?
Diane,
Diane?
how does this compare with rent control throughout the state? I mean, this
Like-
particular formula.
Yeah, so it seems that, some of them use CPI, some of them actually have flat percentages, it looks like they have no more than 5% or something like that. And then some of them do this percentage. I haven't found any, like I said, that take wage growth in, which is like what I want us to consider more broadly, because I think the goal of rent control is so we don't displace communities, right? We have a working class community, we have retired people that are on fixed income, we have students here that are on fixed incomes, and we don't want to displace our community. We like the composition of our community. And so taking wages into account, I think, is important theoretically, but it doesn't seem to translate very well into a rent ordinance because of the way that wage growth is calculated. And so this seems to be a common sort of way of dealing with that, is that it's not just CPI, but rather a percentage of CPI.
So when you say a common way,
Yeah,
but we haven't seen it anywhere else.
I've seen several examples of it. No, I don't have them with me, but we can, I think Newark might,
In other
Newark might be a flag,
communities.
right, in other ordinances in New Jersey. There's actually, someone did a report, I did not bring it with me, but I can
I
give
know
it to Terry
circulated,
to,
yes, the one that we were talking
Yep,
about, there
yep.
was figures year after we did our ordinance in Highland Park, the study out of one of the Rutgers places did a whole survey of rent control ordinances in New Jersey.
Right.
And they had a nice breakdown of how they calculate the increase,
Mhm.
Not specifically, but using CPI, arbitrary number, this, that. So we can circulate that.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
So will we use a nationwide wage growth, or will we use the medium income of Highland Park?
Not using wage growth is what I'm suggesting. Instead of doing that would be a percentage of CPI. So 75% of CPI instead of 100% of CPI.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So what we're doing times 0.75 is what I would suggest. It doesn't have to be that number. I would just suggest that it's not 100%.
I think I'd like time to think about this.
Go ahead,
Can I
Diane.
make one more correction? When I said there might be 400, that doesn't mean they are all owner occupied. Of that 400, maybe 60 are owner occupied, not 400.
Oh, the 400 double units you meant.
Yeah. in
That's
town.
what I thought. That's what I was gonna say. I'm not so
No.
sure. Yeah, that's.
I think that sounds closer to right. Other comments on the CPI? Other thoughts, Pauline?
I think I need to think about it. Yeah.
Shall we move on? Vacancy decontrol. Open up discussion. This also includes, by the way, revolving tenancy or any of those issues.
Yeah, so
Okay.
when I think about the fact that once
a unit is vacated and then it's allowed to be rented out at market rate, this means that new units in our community are not affordable to working people, to students, to, so I think that's something for us to think about. Because we're just pricing people out of being able to move into new, not new, but units that are now available in our community.
Right.
And that the only people who, I think about students, working people who are able to afford apartments in town. If they were to have to move and move within our community, they wouldn't be able to afford it. So I think that's something for us to think about in terms of vacancy decontrol.
Heather, can you explain again what's on the table right now about the CPI?
Oh, see, we're gonna
No,
go back
no,
to CPI,
about the-
vacancy
the-
decontrol?
The index.
Oh.
Just say, can you say it more succinctly?
Okay, so if you look here, the way that we calculate our CPI, so that'll be the fourth column would be the result of that,
Right.
because it's CPI Philadelphia and
And
CPI New York City, and
yeah.
we're currently just doing an average of those two.
Right,
This represents price growth, how much inflation is, how much the prices are growing, right?
right,
In the
right.
first column, we have average wage growth for Middlesex County. And you can see that there's a huge divide between, or a huge discrepancy between how fast wages are growing versus how fast prices are growing. And right now, we're pegging our maximum increase to price growth. But it's
Right.
what wage growth is lagging so far behind that over time, as those price growth increases compound, that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Exponentially and much faster than wages are growing. And so at some point that discrepancy is growing so big that people will ultimately be unable to afford where they're living, regardless of whether or not they can now. And
Okay,
that's the problem. Yeah. Did I explain that well enough?
you sure did.
Okay, great. Yes.
But you're talking about Middlesex County, not Highland Park.
Right, we don't have data for Highland Park specifically, just like we don't have CPI for Middlesex County, we only have CPI for the cities that we live between, right? We don't have CPI for Highland Park and we don't have wages for Highland Park because those data are not collected.
So did you
that level of
say a
specificity.
proposal? Did you say an alternate to how we are doing it now?
So what I'm suggesting, because I had presented this just to demonstrate
Right.
how far this, the price, how far wages lag behind, like, prices, behind inflation,
Right.
right?
Right,
Which in real terms means that if your prices go up, everything that you're paying goes up and your wages don't, you're poorer than you were the year before, right?
yes,
Right. So over time, that can become very problematic if you allow
Right.
them to continue growing at disparate rates like that.
right,
Right. And so what I'm saying, rather than, because initially I had proposed that we somehow factor in wage growth,
yes,
and looking at a bunch of ordinances, that's not very common practice. But what is common practice, or what we do see in other ordinances, is that rather than taking just CPI, they take a percentage of CPI. So allowing it to be 75% of CPI. So instead of 3.55, it would be 75% of that.
okay.
Yeah, would be the max
Okay,
increase.
now I get it.
Okay.
I get it. Thank you,
We got anything else on CPI? Sorry, we shouldn't have breezed past that so quickly.
thank you.
All right, let's go back then to what Lucinda was discussing with vacancy decontrol, which is right now, the ordinance states that when once units are vacated, that they can be raised to market rate. They're no longer subject to rent control. They have to be able to, landlords have to be able to rent them, right? So they can't, but they can rise to market at that point. And so Lucinda has made one argument and like to hear from others.
Well.
Go ahead, Diane.
I think we're looking at tiered systems of housing. We're looking at keeping the housing stock at a level that will it include maintenance? Will it include the cost of what it costs to renovate, redo an apartment when the apartment is vacant. There are other factors, I think, other than just keeping it at a certain point, a certain rental price. And I think that could be a danger if we don't include maintaining and upgrading the housing stock.
Point of information, capital improvements still apply to vacant, would apply, we'll say, let's say we had vacancy control, landlord would still be able to apply.
I have to, I mean, my instinct is I would think so, but I hadn't thought about it. But yeah, I don't see why. I mean, I think they'd have to make the same, they have to come in early and make the same, whatever application, and we know we have to tighten up that application. So there would be a mechanism to do that, I think. But yeah, I hear what you're saying too, in terms of, yeah. No, I have a question more, so if you have another point.
Go ahead, Terry, and then Lucinda.
And I know I've said this before, one of my concerns about not having vacancy decontrol, and it's somewhat basic, is it's more difficult to manage that information. How do you ensure that? And I know you've done some research, Heather.
How do you track it?
Yeah, how do just given that it's like he and I, and we have 5 other things we're supposed to be doing. How do we track and make sure that actually is happening? That landlords are, if there wasn't decontrol, I forget what you call it.
Vacancy control.
Vacancy control, there's vacancy control. That means we got to track leases. We've got to, so there was some practical concerns I had, which doesn't take away your point at all, but I didn't know if in your research, and I know Jake has been doing some research, so we can do that research. But if that was something, if you've done any research on that, how, other than I'm familiar with how certain places have done it, and it was very cumbersome. So I just know our limitations to some extent.
Go ahead,
Yeah, that's
Lucinda.
fair. Well, and then another option would be, and I brought this up last time, is revolving tenancy, which we haven't discussed today, but where you have a group of people renting one place, one of them leaves, and instead of there being a new lease, rent control applies in that case, because maybe they're bringing in another tenant, they're still.
As long as one of them
is one of
is
them
still on there,
original.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's another option, because that would certainly, yeah, it's just another option.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Diane.
according to our housing ordinance, if that person leaves, that entire unit is now inspected for code compliance and maintenance issues. So it's very possible that one person leaves and it could be a big expense depending on how things are looking.
Yeah, and that's certainly something to consider. I just keep, thinking about students in particular who, have a fixed income and can't, afford to have the rent go up 30%.
Others? Pauline? Anything here? I think that's a fair point. And so if this were implemented, I think we would want to look to make.
Revolving.
Yeah, we would want to make sure that other ordinances that are factored into that, and that, and
How would
some of
that
those,
impact reinspection?
right, some of those changes might need to be made to those ordinances then to make them line up so that they harmonize with whatever changes are made to the rent control ordinance. I think that's fair, right?
I agree.
Because maybe that doesn't need to be the case if it's,
Well, then we're talking about depreciating the maintenance. We have to want to keep that at a level.
but wouldn't that be the same if that tenant just had stayed, let's say the example is 3 roommates and one moves out, if that roommate had just stayed there forever, you would have the same, it would be the same as if someone was replacing that person, I think. I think that's just something to note, right?
Yeah, I'll definitely look into, I hadn't thought of that points.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
So, all roommates, like if it's 3 roommates, they will all be on the lease, original lease, okay.
But if
Now
one of
we
them
need a new
left,
lease also.
Right.
So
Yeah,
there's
that's
the
what
fee
Terry is.
for, to have a new lease drawn up, including a new person, the screening for that person. I mean, there are expenses, even if you just have one person.
Yeah. No, but that person was already on the lease, right? So doesn't
But
everyone?
2 new people come in, you've got to
Order.
evaluate them, sorry.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, I'm just trying.
understand what.
Yeah,
we're proposing.
if it's 3
One
individuals on the.
leaves.
And one leaves, and
and a
they
new
bring in
person
someone
comes
new.
in.
Oh, you want to replace okay, I thought it was just, okay, 3, original 3,
Yeah.
now 2, the 2 can stay there and
And
just
someone else
pay.
moves.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, I
someone
didn't
else
know
moves
someone
in.
else was moving in, and I thought it
Yeah.
was.
That's the revolving part of the tenancy. It
Yeah.
happens a lot with students, right? So one graduates and the other 2 haven't, and they get a new roommate.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Terry.
I just, as a former owner of 2-family with my husband, we actually loved this because it meant you didn't have to advertise. There's the switch side is when the 3
You don't have
graduate
to go
students,
look
one
for
leaves, they find another roommate. You don't have to advertise, like there's some advantages. So I tend to think landlords like it as much as not, and not maybe the decontrol factor, but it is very common and it actually helps because that saves you money on advertising and things like that. If people find their own new roommate. But so I'm totally neutral on yes or no to that, but I will say in my experience, it's very common that landlords don't mind that because it's like, oh, good, I don't have to worry about this. You guys worry about it. You guys get along, but we always had everybody on the lease. That was important.
Mhm.
Other comments on this? I tend to agree with Lucinda on this. I would also like to go on record. I would like complete vacancy control. That shouldn't surprise anyone. I think that we could model our ordinance after that of Newark and several others in New Jersey that have vacancy control. I think the point of rent control, like Lucinda says, we don't want it to just be that the existing units are ones that are affordable, but we want when new units open up to also be affordable to the community that we serve, right? So I think that's important to have, and to the extent that it gets enforced, like our entire rent control ordinance is based on community knowing to come to us when they're even our rental increases, right? We don't go out, we don't have those certified at this point. We don't check anybody's leases. And so the fact that we even have a maximum rent increase, it's not a command and control style of policy enforcement that we have anyways. It is member, or community education and people knowing to come to us when it's been violated. So I think that would hold even in the case that we had vacancy control and we were subjecting new leases to control. Yes, the new person moving in may not know that, right? But it's discoverable and it could be.
I understand.
And I think there's other ordinances that we could model ourselves off of that have vacancy control. But I think all points should be reported equally. Just and fair return. Anne's phoning a friend for her answer.
Sorry about that.
Comments on just and fair return.
Well, we've looked at other ordinances, whether or not that. We have to make a recommendation of some kind in terms of what that should be.
Yep.
Because that does have to be defined when people come forward with hardship applications, so, yeah.
Go ahead, Carrie.
So I'm just want to characterize this like tightening up the definition, putting a definition, because frankly, the current ordinance doesn't have one at all. Okay.
And I think that's just the recommendation we want to make to the
Okay.
council, right? Are we all on board with that? And let them figure out what those details are.
Got it.
All right,
Are we gonna put a number there before we send it to them?
do we want to put
I
a
mean,
number there?
you
before
can
we send
say,
this?
suggest that they should look at a number, you know.
Well, I feel like we should put the number on recommendation from something.
Okay,
Okay. Put a
I'm
number.
okay with that.
That's what I think.
Okay.
It's a calculation.
Yes.
It's not a number, it's really not. I'm sorry, keep going.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
So, okay, we went through everything. I just want to know the timeline. So now you guys, you'll sleep on all of this. We'll come back with the edit, then you have to vote, then it'll come to us.
I don't even know if there's a vote. I mean, this is.
I don't know that, I mean, because we're just giving recommendations and we agreed to just include the range of different opinions that we have rather than trying to come to consensus here, since that seems very unnecessary, given that we're not the policymakers, you are, right? That we give you all of our sort of the range of thought on this and let the council take it from there.
And
Go ahead,
what
Terry.
we had discussed was Jake and I would take this feedback as well as the feedback of the public when we get there, and
Mhm.
also prior meetings, because we've talked about this a couple of times in various ways. Basically to draft a memo, almost like imagining this is on your behalf, like these are the things, and that would then go to the council for consideration. And then with your committee and working with
Yeah.
SAPNA, you know, ultimately ordinance amendments would be drafted.
Go ahead, Lucinda.
And is that something we would review at the next meeting? Is that,
Yeah, we could do that, or it could be an email. I don't know. We could talk
Yeah.
about that. I hadn't thought about
it would
it.
just be great to just see it before it goes off. to
Sure.
The committee.
I think if we're expecting to have any like veto power over it or the ability to make any kind of edits, we should probably reconvene to not vote to accept
Yeah.
it, but vote that, yes, this is our
And
report.
for example,
I don't want to have any kind of deliberations via email that challenges the fact that we do a quorum when we're over email. So we
Right.
need to not,
Yeah.
there needs to not be deliberation in that space.
and I heard a couple people say, I need to think about that. And
Right.
so maybe if we put this memo together, you look at it and you might say, I like that, but this, and we can add that too. We can always add to the memo.
Go ahead, Blaine.
So I think when Stephanie said timeline, we can tell her if in the next 2 meetings or in the next meeting. I think that's what,
It needs to
I'm
be,
not
dis-
speaking for her, but I'm thinking that she wants an idea of how soon.
No, I just.
Go ahead.
I just didn't
Go ahead,
know, so you got, this is your suggestion, that it will come as a form of a memo.
Oh,
Or
okay.
so, I didn't know you have to vote again, like I wasn't.
I don't
think.
think you have to vote, I think, but I would like to know that we captured the spirit of what you
Right.
want to convey.
It would essentially be like the approval of minutes, I think.
Yeah.
would be-
I
I
would
mean,
just
we're
say,
not like
does this
voting in
memo
a
cover
consensus
all the
way.
points? And then if the answer is
Right.
yes, you know, and we won't say, you know, obviously if something that everybody thought was, you know, like we'll use just and fair, everybody agreed, we need to tighten that up. We need to probably put a number, work with, you know, work amongst your, the council should work to figure out what it's comfortable with. Based
Go
on
ahead,
some of the
Stephanie.
research.
So they would need this back. I mean, well, okay, rent control would need this, like our final edits before October. Remember, finance meets quarterly.
You
and
can always have a special meeting.
Okay,
I think you're
but-
over worrying.
No, I'm trying to, so I mean,
The only time, really time sensitive, there's some cleanup that we all discussed many meetings prior that
Mhm.
really needs to happen. That there's just wrong things in there that we gotta fix. So we do want to make some amendments this year. If there's a decision, if council wants to influence this CPI, for example, for next year, this
Mhm.
calculation, there's some time sensitivity because we gotta get that done in time for our October
and that's what I'm
deadline.
saying.
So there are some, you know, deadlines, but I think we can turn around a memo pretty quickly. If you are up for a meeting next month, we could reconvene next month and review it. And then that memo can be.
I think we should probably plan on that and
Yeah.
it'd be a very, very short meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's a good
Next
idea.
month,
Yep.
yes, yes.
And then that way, if, let's say, we'll look at the finance committee schedule, if it doesn't match up, I'm sure folks would be to talk about this, just to keep it moving. Mhm.
'Cause
And
then-
Jared is in here, so this will give him a chance to weigh in. as well.
Yep.
and then we'll take it. work
And then at
session
that
and all
point-
that.
Yes, and certainly at the point where we have some some real, like an actual amended ordinance, we could share it with the committee, the board as well. But presumably it will have gone through your committee, so there's some consensus behind it.
I mean, I'll go to the council meetings and
Yeah.
watch when it comes
Yeah.
up. I mean, so you don't have to bring it back
Well,
here.
yeah, so our committee, it's myself and two other council members who probably want to kick it around a whole bunch of time, knowing them too. Okay,
Yeah.
all their edits, they want to look at it, then it'll come to.
It'll probably go to a
open
work session of council.
Then it'll go to a whole where everyone
When
will
it gets-
decide.
Okay.
The other two council members that's on finance, it's Matthew Hirsch and Councilman Phil George. So they will be the first two eyes to see it.
All right, any last comments on the ordinance itself before we move to public comment?
No, I'm good.
And I think we have a plan, which is to compile all of these, put it together into a report, send it out, and then we'll plan on convening next month to give it a final look, give Jared a chance to weigh in, and then approve it in the same way we would approve minutes, but not. And if we need a resolution for that, we can do that, but I don't know that that's necessary since this is largely an informal act of the board to give recommendations. It's not our formal charge. All right, shall we move to public comment?
Yes, Jake, you might want to turn.
Let me turn that mic on.
Remember, there's a thing at the base.
We have people on.
There is only one person on Zoom.
Is anybody here to speak in public comment?
I actually had to leave, so that's perfect.
Yeah, there we go.
Have the opportunity to-
If you could
Just
state
tap
your
it or-
name.
Oh, I might need it. I gotta turn the mic. I forgot to turn it back.
No,
I can also talk loud.
No, it helps for the Zoom.
you might
Oh,
not be
I
able to
can
hear
hear you.
online if you,
No, I get it.
although my voice is scary in whatever microphone.
I think
This
it's working
mic
now.
is great.
Okay,
It picks
I
up
think
everything.
Only picks up my voice.
Okay.
My name is Jessica Huntington and I am on Montgomery Street. And I just want to thank all of the volunteers who serve on this committee. I know that a lot of our committees across our borough are entirely made up of volunteers, and so that you're giving your time to that. And I just wanted to share some concerns. This is my first rent control board meeting, but I've attended a number of mayor and council meetings over the years and seen the public comment period. And I was very concerned about last month's rent control board, and specifically the engagement of our attorney that our taxpayer monies are paying. And I just wanted to raise that because I wanted us to be aware that I don't think we want that kind of engagement with our volunteers. And I also want the mayor and council to know that they need to consider that kind of engagement with the public. And I've raised that before. I have attended a mayor and council meeting in which Attorney Shaw also engaged with community members in that way. And I just want the mayor and council to really think about whether or not they want that kind of engagement with the public. I think it diminishes. I think it is condescending. I think it's disrespectful, and it doesn't allow for us to value you as volunteers who are serving on our committees, but also it sends a message to our public that the mayor and council don't want to hear from the public. And I have also noticed that the public comment period in the mayor and council meetings has significantly changed since Attorney Shaw started, and that it has what appears to me to be being told that they should not respond in any way to public comments. Like, listen to all the public comments, don't say anything, I will manage it, meaning Attorney Shaw. And I think that the mayor and council really need to consider that. So thank you again for your service. It was really, I appreciated being able to be here and hear. I'm a homeowner. I don't rent out my property. I don't rent a property, although I rented here for 4 years before I bought a home. And so I just appreciated the opportunity to be able to hear your deliberation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Others? State your name.
Hello, I'm Kate Stevens, I'm on Wayne Street. I do want to highly recommend that Rutgers report that was mentioned earlier. I was reading it earlier today. It's great, very readable. It's called Rent Control in New Jersey. What is it? Where is it? How does it work? It was published in 2024, and it looks at rent control history of New Jersey, as well as more recent things. It's got some beautiful graphics that show sort of the diminished impact of rent control as exemptions are added, and that reduces the positive impact. There's also been a lot of great studies discussing how broadly New Jersey has very moderate rent control, such that it does not tend to have the negative impacts that are seen elsewhere. And our rent control is currently, pretty in line with that. I do also want to support the discussion of the different ways of calculating CPI. There are many, there's again discussion in this lovely report about the different ways to sort of do that percentage cap of a certain percentage of CPI to help keep it sort of sticky in the same way that wages are sticky. And I also wanted to note that there are multiple ways of vacancy decontrol. I agree. I think that keeping vacancy decontrol or making vacancy decontrol not part of our ordinances would, like, having there be no decontrol would be best to help maintain the possibility for people to leave and return. Currently, that's not an option for lots of people. There are many people that I know who are unable to move out of their current apartment, even if they would like to, because it cuts off the option of returning to a place that they may love. And that's very depressing and sad, and it reduces people's freedom to be a person. There's also, you can have once a year or once every 10 years, there could be decontrol for the building. In terms of, it also has some lovely suggestions in the back about how to build a proper municipal rent control resource center with suggestions for how to keep track of these things, how to provide more information to individuals to create better processes. I think that it would be great if some of these FAQs, for example, which does include like I was reading the lovely FAQs on the website, and they do in fact mention that you can't do the rotating tenancy thing. But it's not in our ordinances that you can't. It is simply in the FAQ. Either way, I might suggest that those be required to be included in new leases being sent out in the same way that lead packets are sent out with new leases. And finally, if we're having trouble tracking these things, then what are my tax dollars paying for? It's possible to create a database to have landlords register. It is possible to create a form for renters to report what their building is like, what their rent is right now. There are tools to do this. And I think saying it's too hard is really disrespectful to the citizens that are being served. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone else? Go ahead. Please state your name.
I'm Selena. I'm also on Wayne Street, and I just wanted to speak specifically to the vacancy issue. It is one that, as someone who was just recently looking at renewing a rental lease here, is particularly on my mind. And I am one of those people who, if I leave my current apartment, I cannot afford to remain in Highland Park. I know many people in this situation, students, professionals, and many of the elderly, including neighbors I've talked with extensively about this. And this issue of vacancy being our exception is a really dangerous one, because if you have a landlord that, for instance, does meet the law, but always just within the letter, you have no recourse to stay within a community that is so important to you. And I just wanted to say, I hope you all very seriously consider the importance of maintaining that continuity for people in the community, even if they need to change units. For instance, they have a baby and need another bedroom, or they stop working from home and want to downsize, they've retired. But just to really push home how important that can be for people choosing to make a life in this community. Thank you.
You sign up. Others? Check online.
No one's raised their hand online. So.
All right, if we have no further public comment, would anybody, I think I would leave it open for comments if there's anything that came up from the public comment that anyone would like to comment on.
I'd like to know who published, where was that article published so we can look at it?
Oh,
We have it to
Oh,
share.
you have it?
That's the one we were talking about before.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
From
Terry-
last week.
Terry will send it out to him,
Yep.
right? Yep. Good question.
Now we're good. Well,
All right, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Seen unopposed, this meeting of the Highland Park Rent Control Board is hereby adjourned. Everyone, please have a good night, and I will see you next month.
Thank you.